There are some conversations that are uncomfortable. There are some conversations that are difficult. There are some conversations that are necessary because they make people uncomfortable. And today is going to be one of those conversations. And before I read anything, before I tell you my story, I want you and I need you to understand where I'm coming from. I am a former law enforcement officer. I went through 2 different academies. I went through field training. I worked patrol. I responded to calls. I dealt with many people in crisis. I was injured. I believed in what I was doing. I believed in serving the community, and I believed in the department that I worked for. So when I talk about the problems in law enforcement, I'm not someone on the outside looking to decide that I know what policing really is. I lived it. I know what the badge means, or should I say what it's supposed to mean. I know camaraderie. I know chain of command. I know what loyalty means. And I also know what it feels like when loyalty gets twisted into an expectation of silence. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Last week, I came across a statement from the Dallas Police Women's Association concerning an incident with a female officer and a supervisor, a male supervisor. And when I read it, something in me immediately went, I think I've been here before. Not the same circumstance, not the same department, but the very same underlying issue. The same imbalance of power, the same discomfort, the same question of whether speaking up is actually going to protect you or whether it's going to make you the problem. And I want to make something very clear before I read this statement. She will not be identified. I don't know her. I don't need to know her. Her identity is not relevant to this conversation. What happened to her is not an invitation for people to go investigating her. This is not about her. It's about the conduct. It's about accountability. And it's about the culture that continues to allow these things to happen in the first place. So I'm going to read the statement, and then I'm going to tell you what happened to me. And I think it's important that people understand that sometimes the person criticizing the system is not necessarily someone who hates the system, but maybe rather a person who believed in it enough to be completely devastated when it failed it. So here's the statement from the Dallas Police Women's Association. Monday, August 3rd, 2026. The Dallas Police Women's Association is compelled to address a deeply disturbing incident that reached its conclusion today. A few months ago, a male supervisor approached a subordinate female officer. The supervisor asked innocuous questions about what kind of game she had on her phone, watched her unlock her phone with a password, and then told her he would download a game for her. She agreed, and he took her phone. He claimed the cell coverage was weak, and he walked a bit away from her. While he had her phone open, he went a step further and found her password-protected hidden photos. He discovered some intimate image of the subordinate officer and sent them to himself via text message twice. He then handed back her phone. Later, she noticed that he was the last contact in her messages, though she hadn't texted him recently. And that's when she discovered what he had done. He claims it was accidental. He accidentally clicked her photo icon. He accidentally scrolled and scrolled to find hidden photos tab. He accidentally memorized her password. He accidentally entered her password to access the hidden photos folder. He accidentally scrolled through her images. He accidentally texted those images to himself twice. He accidentally deleted the evidence. Today, this supervisor faced a disciplinary hearing and emerged with a mere 15-day suspension. He was not fired, nor was he demoted. He remains a supervisor. This is a slap on the wrist to him and a slap in the face to every female officer in our department. Let me be completely clear. The female officer at the center of this incident is one of the kindest and most private individuals you could ever meet, embodying the very essence of what it means to serve as a police officer. I will not tolerate any further attempts to disturb her peace. I refuse to entertain inquiries about her identity and implore everyone reading this to respect her privacy. This is not about her. This is about a monumental betrayal to every single female officer. She placed her trust in a supervisor only to be devastated by his betrayal. The thought of her intimate images being exposed is mortifying. Who would have to witness her vulnerability? The very department that has shattered her trust is charged with handling this sensitive investigation. Can you fathom the soul-crushing weight of the reality? It's devastating. She feared the repercussions of filing a complaint against this extreme and illegal violation of her privacy. What does this say about our department and its handling of such matters? And her fears were indeed justified. Yet, in the face of this horrific breach of trust, she chose to file a complaint because she understood that this is not about her. The Dallas Police Department's handling of this and other incidents exhibits an appalling disregard for workplace ethics and fosters a toxic environment that devalues female officers. Female officers are often seen as expendable and are vulnerable to objectification and abuse by male supervisors without significant consequences. This culture not only undermines the trust and safety of female officers, but also perpetuates a cycle of predatory behavior that is frequently ignored and brushed aside by the department. While the Women's Association wants to see a rise in female recruit numbers, we cannot advocate for any woman to sign up for such abuse and hypocrisy. We demand serious, tangible change. Incidents like this set us back decades. The female officer involved in this incident did not ask for us to speak up. She did not request anything to be done, but this is not about her. This is about all of us. We cannot be silent. Now let that sit for a moment. There is a line in that statement that is loud. This is not about her. And it shouldn't be. Because when a woman reports misconduct, why is the conversation so often redirected towards the woman? Why did she this? Why did she do that? Why? At what point are we going to stop examining the woman and start examining the person who allegedly crossed the line? That is what bothers me the most. I know this personally. I have been the woman who had to sit and ask myself, am I making too much of this? Am I overreacting? What's going to happen if I speak up? And that is where I want to take you back to the beginning of my career with a particular department. So I began my career with this department in June of 2019. Graduated the academy, and around December 2nd of that year, I began my department's orientation before going into field training. During that training period, there were things that happened involving a captain that just made me very uncomfortable. In the beginning, I tried to explain them away. A lot of women do that. We tell ourselves, well, maybe he didn't mean it that way, or maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. But over time, your body starts telling you something before your brain is willing to admit it. And I remember feeling uncomfortable enough that I did not want to be alone with this man. One of the first incidents happened during that initial orientation. Myself, two other recruits, and a civilian employee were in training with this captain, having a general conversation about relationships, family, marriage, and I was single at that time. I had recently come out of a tumultuous relationship where I survived strangulation. I made a comment about marriage, stating that if I was ever going to get married again, that man better have enough money to make sure that I never had to work. And I said it jokingly, but the captain states, I'm right here. And it caught me off guard. And I remember it being uncomfortable, but I brushed it off. Later that same day, he looked at me and stated, I may not be able to make you dinner, but I can sure cook you breakfast. And again, I was uncomfortable. I didn't say anything about it at that time, but those words stayed in the back of my mind. And I knew then that I did not feel comfortable being alone with him. March 2021, I was injured during a physical altercation with a wanted subject on a traffic call with my sergeant. And I ended up at the hospital. I sprained my wrist pretty bad and had a minor concussion. Now, I lived alone at the time, and I had no immediate family in the area at all. So the attending ER doctor gave me his cell phone number in case something went south and I needed to call someone for help, because he and the rest of the medical staff were aware of my situation. So a medical professional making a decision based on my circumstance, and this captain tells me that I must be something special for the doctor to give me his phone number. He then continued to make comments about the nurses and how good looking they all were. And I wanted to cry because by that time, no one else from the department was there, and this man was going to have to take me back to the department. Once they released me, we get into his department issued vehicle, and he asks me if I'm hungry. I declined. I was not comfortable being alone with him, and I didn't want to go anywhere with him. I just wanted to get back to the department as soon as possible. But instead of going straight back, he drove me around the area, giving me an unnecessary tour, and then drove me to a neighboring city to show me a mental health facility, because I, at the time, was the department's mental health officer. And this whole time, I'm thinking how I just want to get out of this car. We eventually made it back to the department, and multiple times he asked me if I needed a ride home. He offered his personal place of residence as a refuge for me since I lived alone and sustained a head injury. I said no, and I remember telling myself that I didn't care if it took me 3 hours to drive 15 miles. This man is not going to know where I live. That's how uncomfortable I was. And that matters because intent is not the only thing that matters. Impact matters. Power dynamics matter. Circumstances matter. When somebody has the authority over your career, you don't get to pretend the power imbalance doesn't exist. The next morning, my sergeant called to check on me, and he told me that the captain actually mentioned the invitation to him and made a statement as if he could make it an order. My sergeant told the captain that if I really needed someone to stay with me or vice versa, I was fully capable and would have said so. If I needed help, I knew to ask. I knew how to call 911, and I also knew that I could reach out to the doctor who discharged me. But what I didn't need was a captain making me feel uncomfortable. And this is where the story gets bigger. During the time I had been with the department, I had overheard many other women talk about how uncomfortable this captain made them. I heard other men tell stories about complaints from other females who were no longer with the department. And then I remember that when I completed my probationary assessment, this captain made me climb on a step stool facing him and forced a hug on me inches away from my face. And I thought about the other women, not just as women, but as me being the department's mental health officer. I understood what this type of anxiety and anguish could do to someone, especially in a profession that is historically dominated by men. And I promised myself if there was anything I could do to make it right or better, that's what I was going to do. Around April 2021, I received a phone call from my shift's dispatcher. She had been training a new employee, and this employee confided in her about comments made by this captain and how she felt uncomfortable. Then the dispatcher tells me that this employee asked her not to say anything because she couldn't afford to lose her job. Think about that. I can't afford to lose my job. That should tell you something about workplace culture. Her fear was not in the conduct. Her fear was in the consequence of reporting the conduct. I advised her to speak to our shift sergeant and if she needed to contact HR, if that was more comfortable. And then a few days later, another female officer comes to me and tells me an incident with this same captain. This man touched her backside and told her he was just trying to fix her belt keeper. He had also invited her to go camping, and she didn't know what to do. I told her straight up, no one has the right to touch you. Not him, not me, like no one. And then she started questioning herself and wondered if maybe she had made too much of it. I told her wrong is wrong. And I asked her, consider a battered woman. How many times does someone experience abuse and then try to justify what's happening to them before it's too late. Because that's exactly what we do. We rationalize, we minimize, we question ourselves. And sometimes that self doubt is exactly what allows that type of behavior to continue. So I spoke with my sergeant, and ultimately I made the decision and filed a formal complaint under Chapter 614 of the Texas Government Code. I documented what I had personally experienced, and I documented what I had observed and made it clear where I was speaking on my own experiences and where I was reporting with the things that had been shared with me. I trusted that process. I believed the city that employed me cared about employee well-being. I wholeheartedly believed that the matter would be handled appropriately. And initially, let me give credit where credit is due. The HR director at that time was extremely supportive, and an investigation was initiated. A third party team was brought in. The captain was placed on leave. Myself and the other women who came forward were all cooperating. But then something happened, and I think it's incredibly important when we talk about toxic workplaces. We all started feeling like we were being treated like we were the problem. We were being talked about, not just within the department, but to neighboring departments, other first responders in the area. There was somehow an implication that we all conspired against this man. And get this, and our shift sergeant was involved. All I could think about was, how did we go from reporting conduct that made us uncomfortable to being treated like we were the predators? And that's what people need to understand. Retaliation does not always look like someone coming into your office and saying, "You're fired because you complained." Sometimes it's whispers. It's gossip. It's being labeled difficult. It's people saying, "I wonder what she really wanted," or even being told that this is just how he is and you should really let it go. And you really begin to question yourself. And then the captain retired. And because he was no longer an employee, the investigation stopped. Devastating, to say the least. We were truthful. We cooperated to the fullest. And the person at the center of the investigation retires, and the whole process ends. And if that's not the icing on the cake, I later learned that the complaints and allegations were never placed in his permanent file. And this man went to work for another agency in the DFW area. Think about what that means. If a department or institution says it takes complaints seriously, but the practical result is that the person can leave and collect their retirement and potentially secure employment elsewhere without any documented history following him, what message is this sending? And what does it say to those who reported him? I ultimately filed a second complaint against the chief at that time because the way things were handled were wrong. He was already in the middle of getting ready to retire as well. But I was left with a growing realization that I didn't know if there was a place for me with that department any longer. And I started looking at other departments. And then I was told by someone from another department that I had developed a reputation for being difficult. There were people putting things into the ears of others at other departments. And whether those things could be proven or not, the message I received was clear. Speaking up had consequences. And that's what people need to understand. You do not have to fire someone to push them out. Sometimes you make the environment so uncomfortable that these people leave on their own. Shortly after new command staff is brought in, things got a little more difficult when I tore a ligament in my previously injured wrist. And the damage in my wrist was pretty significant. I ultimately needed surgery. And while I was out on workers' compensation, healing and preparing to return back to work to light duty, I got a call from the new HR director informing me that I needed to report to City Hall on Monday, my day back, rather than to the PD, because I was going to be helping out the water department. I questioned it. And I was told because there was a bona fide need in that department, if I did not report or refused to report, I would lose my workers' comp benefits. So by the time I, thought about the layers and layers of all that had been going on, my complaints, my concerns, other complaints regarding issues I believed involved other people's rights, officer misconduct, the culture, I eventually made the decision to leave Texas. The damage to my wrist was permanent, so I ultimately could no longer work as a patrol officer. And that's where my law enforcement career ended. But not because I stopped believing in service, and not because I stopped caring about people. Not because I hated the badge, but because my body was just no longer fit for duty. My experiences, however, with that specific department really changed the way I see law enforcement. So when I read the Dallas Police Women's Association statement, I didn't just see it as a news story. I saw it as a woman who was placed in an uncomfortable and vulnerable position. And I see the question so many women have to ask. What is going to happen if I speak up? The question we need to fix. Because if the answer is you could lose your career, or you might be labeled difficult, coworkers may gossip, they may turn on you, and you might be treated like a problem, then we have not created a safe reporting environment. We've created an environment that teaches silence. And silence in the workplace is not healthy. Silence is not trust. Silence is not loyalty. And silence is not consent. And here's where I'm going to address something that is going to make some people uncomfortable, and it might even make them mad. Back the blue. We've all heard it. I've worn the blue. But if back the blue means don't question us, don't investigate us, don't report us, don't embarrass us, don't talk about misconduct, don't criticize leadership, protect the badge at all costs. No, absolutely not. I wore the badge, and it should mean more, not less. If you are entrusted with the authority of an officer, you should automatically be held to a higher standard. And if you are in a supervisory position, that standard should be even higher. If you abuse that authority in any capacity, the badge should not protect you from accountability. It should make accountability more important. This isn't anti-police. It's pro-integrity. Now, I know some damn good officers and some really good former officers. There were some great people in my department and some great people in the law enforcement community who have and still support me. I don't want my criticism of the law enforcement institution to erase the good people who work inside of it. But here's the problem. Good people can't be the excuse for ignoring bad systems. You cannot continue to say, but there are good officers. Of course there are. But that's not my point. The point is whether the system protects people when something is wrong. The point is whether complaints and patterns are taken seriously. The point is whether retaliation is truly addressed, because all that happened in retaliation against us that filed that complaint, and even after, the city had sent out a formal notice about retaliation and how it was not going to be accepted. The point is whether leadership protects those who speak out, whether consequences actually follow the misconduct, and whether women can walk into a law enforcement agency and believe wholeheartedly that they can build a career without having to tolerate inappropriate behavior simply because the person behaving inappropriately outranks them. Law enforcement needs to do better. Women should be able to speak without fear. Retaliation should be taken seriously. All forms of it. Leadership needs to understand that protecting the reputation of a department is never more important than protecting a person inside of it. Consequences have to mean something. We need a culture where saying this is not okay does not automatically make you the enemy. And here's what I know now that I didn't know when I first put on the uniform. You don't protect an institution by hiding its problems. You protect it by confronting it. You don't strengthen a department by silencing it. You strengthen it by creating an environment where people can tell the truth. And you don't honor the badge by protecting someone who needs accountability. Honor is holding them accountable. And to all the women who are still wearing the uniform, if you have ever questioned yourself because someone in authority made you uncomfortable, I want you to hear me. You are not crazy. You are not weak. You are not difficult simply because you have boundaries, and speaking up does not make you disloyal. You can love your department and still say something is wrong. You can believe in law enforcement and demand better from it. Those things can exist at the same time. And to the men of law enforcement, you have some responsibility too. Don't call it locker room talk. Don't tell yourself that it's not your problem. And don't protect someone simply because you have favor with them or they're your friend. Every time good people stay silent, bad behavior gets a little more room to survive. And finally, to leadership. Listen to the women. Listen when they tell you something is not right. Listen when they tell you they are afraid, hesitant, or uncomfortable. If an employee says, I can't afford to lose my job over a complaint, that should stop you in your tracks. That should make you ask, what have we created here that makes someone so afraid to speak? And when multiple women independently come forward about the same one person's behavior, don't ask what's wrong with the women. Ask what the hell is going on in the department. And this is why the Dallas statement hit me so hard. I know what it feels like to be uncomfortable around someone in authority. I know what it feels like to wonder if speaking out is going to cost you your career. And I know what it feels like to realize that I don't belong here anymore. And when I say it's not okay, I don't say it casually. I say it as a former officer. I say it as a woman. I say it as someone who believed wholeheartedly in the profession. And I'm saying it as someone who believes law enforcement can do and be better. It all requires accountability, not performative accountability, real accountability. Document, investigate, and enforce meaningful consequences, not this slap on the wrist BS. And ultimately, this isn't about one woman, one supervisor, or one department. And it's not about me telling my story on a podcast. It's about what happens when people in power believe their position is going to protect them. It's about departments and institutions protecting themselves over their employees. And it's about what happens when women are expected to tolerate things because speaking up is considered more disruptive than the behavior itself. I do not want another woman to put the uniform on and have to stand in a bathroom and cry because she froze up when a supervisor invaded her personal space. I don't want another woman to think that they made too much of something. I don't want any employee to say that I can't afford to lose my job over this. We have to do better, not someday, now, because this is not okay, and silence is not going to fix it. So if you're still with me and you have or you are experiencing something similar, just know that you're not the problem. And if you're in a position of leadership, the measure of your leadership is not how you handle the easy complaints. It's how you respond when someone is threatening the comfort of your organization. That's where true leadership matters. That's where integrity matters. And that's where change has to begin. We shouldn't back the blue. We should be backing integrity, back accountability, back those who have the courage to speak up, keep calling for change. Women deserve better. Communities deserve better. And sometimes the loudest way you can support a profession is to refuse to stay silent when so many things need to change. Thank you for your time today. You guys stay blessed.
The world fell quiet, a voice once clear, until beauty from ashes dried every